let's talk to somebody who is maybe somewhere in the middle 50, right? They're not, I mean, because obviously the top 1% doesn't need this advice. They got teams and they got, they're paying for services. They got this all figured out. But for somebody who might not be there, maybe they have a small team, or maybe it's just them. They have some production coming in. But it's like it's hard to be the originator and the social media manager, and they have the hats that they're wearing start to pile up. What is maybe one or two pieces of advice you'd give somebody in that situation on how they can use some of what we've talked about today?
Sure. I mean, especially, I mean, if you're kind of just if you're kind of in the beginning stages there, or maybe you're you already have like built a good book of business, but you still haven't created this like inbound on demand like marketing. Well, the easiest way would be to really just focus on the Jaime principle again, right? Like I really believe in this because there's a lot of there is an influx of so much information out there now that you really almost have to be careful, honestly. And we even coach our members here, our member partners in Good Vibe Squad, that a lot of even what we talked about in this episode, guys, some of these things, depending on where you are, could also potentially be a distraction, right? Just depends on what stage you're in, and that's why we talked about a lot of like different phases, right? And so I would just say like just keep it simple, right? Keep it simple. Choose one platform right now. Now, I would do the first thing that I talked about. Just set up your profiles first, right? Get started with that. Set up your profiles, and then I would say just be clear. We train about this. We do coaching for our community at Good Vibe Squad for this. But an easy way to think about this is you want to think about your origin story, right? And really, the origin story, guys, this is a very foundational piece to you, and it doesn't matter what business you have. You want to have this because it talks about the hero's journey, okay? It follows this concept of the hero's journey. Shout out to Donald Miller, who wrote an amazing book called Story Brand. If you guys haven't read this, I highly recommend reading it. And really, the hero's journey talks about this concept where this is a formula that if you go to Hollywood and you pitch, if you're a producer, you're screenwriter, scriptwriter, and you pitch Hollywood, they will look at your script and they will overlay this hero's journey formula, and every other commercially successful movies out there follow the same exact formula of the hero's journey. And if you break it, usually one is they won't fund your movie, first of all, or second is there's a high likelihood that your movie bombs just badly, okay, wow, commercially. And so what the hero's journey really is it follows this, like, first is you have a character, right? And there's always a backstory for this character. And so you have your hero, there's always a backstory and something that they're struggling with, right? And now they're struggling something and they want to accomplish something. And so they start and they begin this journey, right? And throughout this journey, they usually meet a guide, right? And this guide, so, whether it's Star Wars, with Luke Skywalker meeting Yoda, the guide, it could also be Harry Potter, right? So Harry Potter meeting the guide, right? Dumbledore, right? It could be same thing with Katniss Everdeen, right? With Hunger Games. All of the movies
Shrek
follow this
meets
formula.
Donkey, yeah.
Exactly, right? And so you meet this guide, and so when you meet this guide, they now they go on this journey. The guide gives them a map, right? Gives them a map, points them in the right direction, and now they go on this journey. And then throughout this journey, there's usually there's a threat, right? And without threats, if there's no danger, there's no point to the story, right? People will feel disengaged. There needs to be some sort of real threat. And they go to this journey and they either succeed or they fail. And usually the higher the stakes, the more that you are engaged into the story, right? So there needs to be like a high stake there. Now, okay, so how does this relate to you as a business owner or for mortgage professionals? Okay, so how does this relate to you guys, right? We've actually created a framework for in Good Vibe Squad where we call it the where, how, and what framework. So you answer 3 questions when you create your origin story. First is, where did you come from? Okay. Basically, like, what led you to get to where you are today in, being a mortgage loan originator, right? So where did you come from? Number 1. 2 is, how have you evolved? And number 3 is, through that evolution, what is your mission now and what you stand for in doing what you do today, right? And so I'll give you an example of this. Again, following the hero's journey, you always want to have a backstory, right, about you. So, for example, for myself, I have a backstory. Preston has a backstory. We have a backstory on why we built Good Vibe Squad, for example. And so, I'm a first-generation immigrant, moved here in the United States, right? And, I had nothing, like, when I first moved out here. And so, I was struggling in the beginning, trying to figure out, my background was actually IT. I couldn't find a job because I was like, fresh off the boat, is what they say. But the thing is, I struggled, really. I really did struggle. And I got to a point where I was even working 2 jobs, guys. And this is true story. I was working in the medtech pathology lab in New York. I was working 2 full-time jobs. Probably one of the hardest things I have to do was I was work in the pathology lab from 3 p.m. all the way down to 11:30 p.m. During my first shift. And then I would drive from the pathology lab at 11:30 to 12 midnight. And then I would work my second shift from 12 midnight all the way down to 8 a.m. Okay, and so throughout this experience, it was crazy. But because of this experience, it was one night I was driving in New York. This was wintertime. I was groggy. Haven't really slept that much. And if you guys are familiar with like snow, usually after a snow and it rains, you get black ice. Okay, on the roads. So I was driving, and the car right in front of me stopped. And then I hit brake, but then I hit black ice at this time, and so I was really I was about to hit this car right in front of me, and at that moment, like, it just struck to me, oh my gosh, like I was about to legit get into an accident at this point, and so thankfully there wasn't any car on the side of the road for me, and I was able to like swivel to the other lane. But at that point, I'm like, McBilly, what the hell are you doing, right? And so at that point, it made me realize, like, man, I have to do something that I actually want, right? And so I was kind of just stuck in this like hamster wheel. And then from that point, I quit my job the next week, the first job. And then the following week, I quit the second job. And then really I pursued and I went on my journey, right? I went on my journey. And, through that journey, I met Preston. I started my own marketing agency. Preston had his own marketing agency. And, throughout the journey, we even co-founded a separate software company that Preston and I co-founded and worked together with. We were able to build this software company from 0 to 15 million within 2 years. But this was a different industry. And so it was really hard for us because we could not serve 2 masters, right? We had to make a decision. And so we successfully exited and sold that software company after that 2 years. And now we just went into Good Vibe Squad, okay? And so the second question is, how have you evolved in that, right? How have you evolved? And so there's always something that you may be struggling with, and there's always the focus here is there's transformation, right? There must be a transformation that happens through this journey for you. And so for us, for example, back in, this is 2019, is when Preston and I, when we were starting out in, we were getting some success already. We were getting more success, and we wanted to really define, hey, we were at a mastermind in Florida, And we were having more success already, but we wanted to really define like, all right, why are we really doing this, right? Like, what's the mission here? And it's so easy to just think about like, yeah, it's kind of a cliche thing to think about, but really the reality is, when we sold that software company and we think about like, what do we actually do in Good Vibe Squad and helping mortgage loan originators? I mean, I'm gonna be honest, guys. I'm not waking up every morning saying like, man, I'm excited to help a loan officer, right? That's not something that like I think about. However, we had to create a way to really make that a reality so that we could be in integrity and define what is our mission, right? And so really our mission is helping everyone reach ownership. And that is for our mortgage professionals, helping them reach ownership in their business, right? Helping the consumers and really understanding that, hey, when we help loan officers, we're not just helping loan officers, we're helping the families that you guys help, right? We're helping the families, and it's interesting because when you think about the how important this is, one of the single biggest factor in a child's success is their zip code, right? So what that means is when loan officers help families, get them from like, bad neighborhoods, bad apartment complexes, moving them to safer neighborhoods, better schools, you guys are literally creating such an impact with affecting bloodlines, right? And so now that is a mission that we can really stand for, right? So we're helping the families reach ownership. We're helping our member partners, our lenders, get ownership in their business. But then also we're helping our team members at Good Vibe Squad have ownership in their lives, right? So that's the third thing is, what is the mission that you're on now, right? And that is something bigger, right? It's not just about selling a house. It has to be bigger than that so that people can get behind you, and now you also have something to stand for that is bigger than just selling a house, right?
Yeah, that's a great example of talking about the hero's journey and how our origin story relates to that, just through the lens of our business, going through building from nothing, the struggles we went through, all the way up to having some wind in our sails, build a software company that we sold our equity in and exited successfully, and I hope they're doing great still, but our journey shifted, right, and then we really honed in and defined our mission. And it kind of reminds me, just the hero's journey is kind of, there's this climb and there's pitfalls and there's moments that the hero almost dies, but then they reclaim their glory, and then they encounter, maybe they have another, maybe they lose to the villain, in the first half of the movie, but then they, something happens, they train, they get better, they get smarter, and then they fight them again, and then they're victorious. And so the hero's journey, like if you think about, like McBee was saying, Star Wars is actually probably one of the easiest examples, but even Shrek follows. Like if you like, let's just compare those two. Let's compare Star Wars to Shrek. There's moments where there's this origin story where they don't want anything to do with any of this. Shrek was in the swamp. Luke was, just hanging out. He was just chilling on a desolate planet. He was like a farmer kid, and that built race. I don't even know what they're called, but like race. Floaty. I don't know what you call that. I don't know the official Star Wars term. So Star Wars heads are gonna be pissed about this episode.
Oh my god!
But Trekkies won today. But he was there, which was the Star Wars equivalent of the swamp, right? And they both were kind of called to action through this process. Something happened that took them on this journey. There's if you think of both of them. Star Wars has had a series throughout all of them of kind of a damsel in distress. Shrek obviously had Fiona. There was a villain in Shrek that was Farquaad. In Star Wars, there's a series of them, but Darth Vader's the most notable. And so which obviously adds a very, like McBee was saying, the higher the stakes, normally the more somebody's engaged. Luke has to confront the fact that the main villain, the person he's been fighting, ends up being his father, his own dad. And so, there's so much that goes into that to make it a pivotal and engaging story. But if you look back at Star Wars, it's interesting. It had probably one of the best story arcs ever. That's why it was successful. But if you look at it from a technological, like watch the original, it was not a great movie from a production value standpoint. It was kind of like a high school project on steroids that ended up becoming, because the story was so good, people loved it, even though it was not that great. The costumes were meh. Now Disney obviously owns it, and it gets a lot better. And so, but still, there's a lesson there. Like, if the story is good, people will have grace for everything else, right? And Star Wars nailed the story. And that story arc, the hero's journey that he referenced, if you do look at the comparisons between Shrek and Star Wars, think of any Lion King is even this way, right? You have Simba, you got the guides, instead of Yoda, it's the pig and the whatever, the little thing,
Timon and Pumbaa.
Yeah, thank you. I'm like the gerbil and the pig. I'm not an animal guy, okay? But that there's like literal examples. It's the exact same framework, but different stories, right? And so, what is your version of the hero's journey? What's the villain, right? This could be about, defining these kind of things. The villain could be, some people decide to make it Rocket Mortgage. Some people decide to make it, the idea of not ever owning a home, or the difficulties that people, the competitors make it. Like, home buying doesn't have to be hard, right? Well, that's essentially saying that people are making it hard. Well, that's the villain, right? So it's like defining what that is for you, defining what the villain is, how you're the hero. Well, actually, and more importantly, you're not the hero. Recognizing that you're the guide and the borrower's the hero all along is actually really the meta level position to take here. Most people hear a hero's journey and go, oh, I'm the hero. And it's like, you need to construct the hero's journey within your own life, but understand that what you communicate, you are the guide. You will always be the Yoda. You will always be the donkey. You will always be the Simone and Pumbaa. That's your role in this story, right? It's just, you need to be involved enough. You need to be kind of meta puppet master in this whole thing enough to understand that while your role in this on paper is the guide, if you don't create the hero's journey for your borrower, nobody else will.